Have you ever watched a cat fall? There's something completely mesmerizing about it, almost supernatural. For those few seconds, it's like they suspend the laws of physics, always managing to land gracefully on all four paws. Where does this superpower come from? Is it magic, pure instinct, or something else entirely? Today, we're going to put on our scientist hats, both physicist and biologist, to unravel one of the oldest feline mysteries. We are going to break down, bone by bone, exactly what happens when a cat is airborne. And I promise by the end of this video, you will look at your fluffy companion with completely new eyes, understanding the complex and perfect biomechanical marvel purring right there on your lap. By the way, has your cat ever displayed a moment of unbelievable acrobatics? Share your most incredible story in the comments below. But before we dive into the nuts and bolts of physics, let's take a trip back in time. This question didn't just plague modern cat owners. Some of the greatest minds throughout the centuries wrestled with this phenomenon. 19th century scientists, including figures like James Clerk Maxwell, were absolutely baffled. According to the laws of classical mechanics, a body that starts falling without any initial rotation cannot spontaneously begin rotating mid-air. It seemed impossible, a genuine paradox. The breakthrough didn't happen until 1894, thanks to the French scientist and photographer Etienne Jules Marey. Using chronophotography, the ancestor of modern cinema, he managed to film a cat's descent, frame by frame, and what he captured fundamentally changed our understanding of feline acrobatics. The world finally saw this magic in slow motion. The conclusion was clear. There was no violation of physics whatsoever. There was only a masterful genius application of those very laws. So let's kick things off by addressing the biggest myth that most people believe. It's just pure instinct. They are born knowing how to do it. That sounds logical, but it's actually a slight oversimplification. The correct technical term is the e-writing reflex. While this is indeed an innate ability, it doesn't just switch on instantly from day one. A kitten has to learn it, practice it, and master it. This reflex usually starts kicking in around 3 or 4 weeks of age, and it's not fully refined or functional until the 7th week. In other words, this is a highly complex skill that demands rigorous training of both the nervous system and the muscles. This isn't just a simple tumble. It's an extremely complex sequence of precise movements executed in a split second. Picture an Olympic gymnast doing a flawless mid-air somersault. Your cat performs the equivalent of that every single time they take an awkward spill off the sofa. And the foundation of this reflex isn't magic or mysticism, but a perfectly calibrated system of internal sensors. How does a cat even know which way is up when it's in free fall, especially with its eyes closed? The answer lies deep within its inner ear. That's where you find an amazing organ, the vestibular system. You can think of it as a highly accurate biological gyroscope. It's made up of a system of tiny, fluid-filled canals and chambers, all lined with sensitive hairs. Any change in head position, acceleration, or rotation causes the fluid in these channels to shift, stimulating the hairs. These signals are instantly sent to the brain, reporting the body's precise spatial position at incredible speed. This is the system that gives the cat the initial data it needs to execute a maneuver. It essentially signals, "We are upside down, take action now." Without this sophisticated navigation system, the ensuing acrobatic feat would simply be impossible. It is the first and most crucial step in the chain of survival. Now we get to the crux of the mystery, the very physical law that cats appear to defy. This is the law of conservation, of angular momentum. Simply put, it states that unless external forces act on a rotating object, its total rotation must remain constant. The most vivid example is a figure skater. When they spin with their arms outstretched, they have a certain speed, but the moment they pull their arms in close to their body, they begin to rotate significantly faster. Their mass hasn't changed, but their moment of inertia has decreased, meaning the rotational velocity must increase to conserve the total angular momentum. The problem with the cat, however, was fundamentally different. It begins its fall without any initial spin whatsoever. Its angular momentum is zero. How could it possibly manage to turn itself around mid-air if that required generating rotation out of nothing? This paradox completely baffled scientists, right up until they realized they shouldn't view the cat as a single rigid body. And here is the genius trick nature bestowed upon cats. Instead of trying to spin its entire body all at once, the cat essentially splits itself into two independent halves. The first step it takes is flexing its spine at the waist, almost forming a right angle. This allows its front and back halves to rotate around different axes, entirely independent of each other. This is the crucial step that seemingly allows the cat to bypass the simple interpretation of the law of conservation of angular momentum. We no longer have a single rotating body, but a system of two masses connected by a highly flexible spine. While the net angular momentum of the entire system remains zero, this doesn't stop the individual segments from rotating in opposite directions, effectively compensating for and cancelling each other out. Imagine you're floating in space in zero gravity. You can't turn around just by flailing your arms. But if you begin twisting your upper body one way and your lower body the opposite way, you can change your orientation. The cat performs this exact maneuver, only far more efficiently and with incredible grace. Let's break down this complex aerial ballet step by step. Once the cat has flexed its body, essentially folding in half, it focuses its efforts on the front section of its body. To maximize the speed of the rotation, it needs to minimize the moment of inertia for those forequarters. How does it achieve this? The cat tucks its front paws tightly to its body, pulling them in toward the chest, exactly like a figure skater pulling in their arms to accelerate a spin. By drastically reducing the radius of rotation for the front half, the cat can pivot that section toward the ground, its target direction, with minimal resistance. This is an incredibly rapid and efficient movement. In that exact instant, its brain, receiving continuous data from the vestibular system, already knows precisely which way it needs to spin. The muscles in the neck and shoulder girdle contract sharply, and instantly, the head and forelimbs are pointing straight down, preparing for the encounter with the surface below. This initial phase of the complex maneuver takes place in mere hundredths of a second. But wait a minute. If the front half rotates in one direction, then, by the law of conservation of angular momentum, the rear half must rotate in the opposite direction, right? Exactly. And the cat employs this principle with incredible ingenuity. To minimize the rotation of the back half in the wrong direction, it does the exact opposite of what it did with the front. It maximally spreads its hind legs, sticking them out wide to the sides. In doing so, it dramatically increases the moment of inertia of its back half. What this accomplishes is crucial. For the required angular momentum, the momentum that counteracts the front spin, the rear section will rotate through a far smaller angle. The result? While the front half quickly snaps 180 degrees, the rear half lazily drifts backward only a few dozen degrees. Pure genius, isn't it? So, let's piece this whole picture together. The front half of the body, with its paws drawn tightly in, spins rapidly into alignment. Meanwhile, the back section, with limbs spread wide, counter-rotates slowly and almost reluctantly, covering only a small angle. The total angular momentum of the cat remains zero. The laws of physics are perfectly intact, but the immediate result is clear. Its head and front paws are now facing the ground. The cat has won the first half of the battle with gravity. At this moment it resembles the letter L, or a flying right angle. But the job isn't done yet. The rear section is still incorrectly oriented. Now the cat needs to pull off the exact same maneuver, only in reverse to bring the rest of its body into line. This is the second act of the aerial performance. With the front half now stabilised and oriented downwards, the cat switches strategies. It does the complete opposite. It extends its front paws forward, dramatically increasing their moment of inertia. Conversely, the back paws are tucked tightly toward the belly, drastically reducing their moment of inertia. What happens next? The cat begins to rotate its rear section to align it with the front. Because the rear section now has such a small moment of inertia, It rotates extremely quickly. Meanwhile, the front section, with its large moment of inertia, only slightly twists in the opposite direction to counteract this movement. As a result, the rear paws rapidly catch up to the front, and the entire body straightens out, adopting the perfect landing position. Back up, paws down. This entire intricate process, which took us several paragraphs to describe, the cat executes in less than a single second. These feats, of course, wouldn't be possible without the unique structure of the feline skeleton, and central to it all is their incredibly flexible spine. Humans have 33 vertebrae. A cat, however, has over 50, including those in its tail. Even more crucial, the intervertebral discs in a cat are far more elastic than ours. This grants them an astonishing freedom of movement. A cat's spine can bend and twist in ways humans could never imagine. It is this exact flexibility that allows a cat to essentially fold itself in half mid-air and rotate the two halves of its body independently. If a cat had the same rigid spine as a human, the righting reflex would be physically impossible. So the next time you see a cat contorted into an almost impossible pose, remember, you are looking at one of the true marvels of evolutionary engineering. There is one more small but absolutely crucial detail in cat anatomy that plays a key role in this whole acrobatic feat: the absence of a proper collarbone. For humans, the collarbones are long bones that rigidly connect the shoulders to the rib cage. In cats, however, the clavicle is a tiny, free-floating bonelet that isn't attached to any other major bones. What does this unusual structure provide? It gives the shoulder girdle incredible mobility. A cat can compress its chest and slip through extremely narrow gaps. But in the context of their aerial maneuvers, this lack of rigidity allows the cat to rotate its front section even more freely relative to its rear. The shoulders aren't restricted by a stiff, bony structure, adding several crucial degrees of freedom to the rotational maneuver. It's just one more small piece in the overall puzzle that makes the cat's sophisticated landing mechanism so perfect and polished. But what about the tail? Many believe the tail is the main tool, the primary rudder a cat uses to steer itself mid-fall. That is one of the most common misconceptions out there. While the tail certainly plays a part, its role is strictly supportive, not primary. It primarily functions as a counterweight for fine-tuning and achieving final stabilization. By whipping the tail one way, a cat can encourage its body to rotate the other. But the vast majority of the work is actually accomplished by the spine and the limbs. The best proof of this lies in tailless cat breeds such as the Manx. They perform the incredibly complex righting reflex just as effectively as their tail counterparts. So the tail is more like a subtle calibration system, the icing on the cake of an already perfect mechanism, but it is definitely not the engine. It's crucial to understand that this amazing reflex isn't a cure-all, and it still requires time to execute. The time available during the fall is directly dependent on the height. Scientists have calculated that a cat needs at least 30 centimeters of free fall to completely rotate 180 degrees. This means that falling from very low heights, say, off a short stool, or even being accidentally dropped from a person's arms, can actually be quite dangerous for them. They simply won't have enough time to complete the maneuver, risking an awkward landing on their side or back. Paradoxically, a fall from a table might actually be safer for a cat than a fall from a chair. It all comes down to those precious fractions of a second needed for their nervous system and muscles to engage. Now let's discuss a curious paradox involving falling from great heights. Intuitively, we assume the higher the fall, the more dangerous it is. And while that's generally true, it holds only up to a certain point. There is a specific phenomenon that veterinarians have dubbed feline high-rise syndrome. Studies have shown that cats falling from heights up to about the 7th floor sustain extremely severe injuries. However, cats that fall from much greater heights, from the 7th floor up to the 32nd, often survive, and sometimes even sustain less serious damage. How can this be? The answer lies in another physical phenomenon: terminal velocity. This is the speed at which the force of air resistance perfectly balances the force of gravity, meaning the object stops accelerating. For a cat, This speed is approximately 100 kilometers per hour. But what exactly happens when a cat hits terminal velocity? This speed limit is usually reached after a fall of about 5 to 7 stories. The sensation of acceleration completely vanishes. The cat's vestibular system stops flooding the brain with panic signals about the ever-increasing speed of the fall. And at that exact moment, the cat relaxes. It moves out of panic mode and active maneuvering, switching instead to a controlled gliding stance. It spreads its legs wide, transforming its body into a sort of living parachute, much like a flying squirrel. This posture maximizes air resistance, which helps slow the descent even more. Crucially, it distributes the force of the final impact over a much wider surface area. Instead of a targeted jarring blow focused solely on the paws, the energy is absorbed and dissipated by the entire body. The final component of this system is the perfect set of landing gear. Even with the perfect mid-air rotation and slowdown, the impact with the ground remains substantial. That's where the cat's incredible paws come into play. They aren't just limbs, they are flawless, built-in shock absorbers. Cats possess incredibly strong, muscular legs, and their joints allow for a massive degree of freedom and motion. Crucially, a cat never lands on stiff, straight legs. Instead, it bends them through every joint, effectively stretching the deceleration process out over a longer period of time. It works much like a sophisticated car suspension system. Impact energy is not transferred to the bones. Instead, it is absorbed and dissipated masterfully by the muscles and tendons. This mechanism is why cats can leap from heights many times their own body length without sustaining the slightest injury. It is the final, perfect flourish in their whole system for fall survival. However, despite all these incredible defense mechanisms, it is vital to remember that cats are not invincible. The righting reflex is not a guarantee of safety. It is merely a mechanism designed to increase their chances of survival. Falls, especially onto unforgiving surfaces like concrete or asphalt, still lead to severe injuries. The most commonly affected areas are the jaw, teeth, lungs, and limbs. High-rise syndrome does not negate the laws of physics, and even a landing on splayed paws from a great height can be fatal. Therefore, you should never experiment or rely on the myth of your pet's 9 lives. Secure window screens or safety nets are not a luxury. They are a vital necessity for any cat living above the ground floor. Their superpower does not grant them immortality. We've already mentioned that this skill isn't completely hardwired from birth. It's not something they simply know right away. Kittens actively practice and learn this ability. They observe their mother, wrestle with litter mates, tumble, and inevitably fall down. Each fall is essentially a training session. The brain learns to process signals from the vestibular system much quicker, while the muscles are trained to react faster and with greater precision. This is a complex neuromuscular skill that absolutely requires practice. That's why young kittens who haven't yet refined this critical reflex are far more vulnerable when they take a tumble. This confirms that what we are observing is not some mystical force. It is the sophisticated result of millions of years of evolution, combined with several weeks of intense, individualized learning for every single kitten. It is a perfected skill, honed through practice, not a pre-programmed miracle. Intriguingly, studying this feline phenomenon has led to applications in some truly unexpected fields. Engineers and roboticists, inspired by the cat's impressive mid-air maneuver, are developing robots capable of adjusting their orientation in space without needing any external force. This could prove invaluable for machines operating in zero-gravity environments or traversing extremely rough terrain. What's more, the very same principles a cat uses to right itself are now being applied even in astronautics. For instance, they allow satellites and space stations to rotate in orbit without relying on expensive jet fuel for thrusters. By utilizing internal flywheels and movable components, a craft can adjust its position while maintaining a net angular momentum of 0. So, your average house cat, completely unaware of its genius, has gifted humanity with some truly brilliant engineering ideas. So, to summarize, A cat always landing on its feet isn't a miracle. It's a magnificent evolutionary ballet, starring physics and biology. It all starts with a high-precision gyroscope located in the inner ear, which initiates the entire process. Next, the incredibly flexible spine comes into play, allowing the cat to essentially split its body into two independent halves. Utilizing the law of conservation of angular momentum, the cat cleverly manipulates the inertia of its front and rear sections. By tucking and extending its paws, it executes precise twists in mid-air. Finally, powerful and springy paws act as shock absorbers, cushioning the impact when it hits the ground. It is a complex, finely tuned, and near-perfect mechanism, though it certainly doesn't make the cat invulnerable. Ultimately, it's just further proof of how complex and truly amazing the creatures living right alongside us really are. The most mind-blowing thing about this whole scenario isn't the existence of the mechanism itself, but how incredibly fast and automatic it is. Just think about that for a second. Every single time your cat awkwardly stumbles and tumbles off the back of a chair, its brain performs incredibly complex physics calculations in a split second. It analyzes its position in space, computes the exact sequence of muscle contractions needed to twist its upper and lower body sections at different speeds in opposite directions, and then executes that entire plan. For humanity, with all our incredible minds, figuring out how the cat does this took centuries, and we actually needed the invention of high-speed photography just to see it happen. The cat, however, solves this problem purely through instinct, effortlessly, while mid-air, often falling from a height of just 3 feet. Isn't that the ultimate reason to have limitless respect for these fluffy little geniuses of biomechanics? So, there you have it. Now you know the whole truth. What looks like feline grace and sheer magic is actually the cold, hard calculation of physics and the genius of evolution. A perfect vestibular system, an incredibly flexible spine, a clever use of the conservation of angular momentum, and shock absorber paws. That's the recipe for the cat's superpower. It's not 9 lives, it's just one, incredibly well protected by nature's brilliant engineering solutions. Thank you for sticking around and watching this video until the very end. If you, like me, now respect your cat even more, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our next scientific deep dive into the animal kingdom. And now for the most important question for you. What other animal superpower do you think deserves this kind of detailed breakdown? Drop your wildest ideas in the comments below, and maybe your topic will become the subject of our very next video.